Hi, and welcome to Redeye and this strategy update. My name is Gustav Meyer, and I work as a life science analyst here at Redeye. And today we have CLS, where we will hear several executives go through the company and also followed by a Q&A session. So let's start this event with the CEO, Dan Mogren. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Gustav. And thanks for having us here at Redeye. I'm very happy to be able to provide you with a strategy update for clinical laser thermia systems. It will be a almost 2-hour-long session. We will go through the company. We talk about our technology platform, looking at the unmet needs on the market today that we address with our product offerings, taking it a little bit from the patient perspective, and what they're looking for and cannot really get today in today's healthcare. Also look a little bit on the market opportunities that we see within the two segments that we are actively working with our products. Give you an update also on our business in the neurosurgical segment in USA. Also the same for the urology business in the US. We're also going to talk a bit about the growth strategy of CLS and the pipeline as we see going forward. More details on the growth of the company and the capitalization plan for the company going forward. And we'll sum it up at the end in an executive summary with some investment highlights and a Q&A after that. So starting off with the company CLS. For you who do not know us, we are an international provider of laser-based treatment systems. We provide systems that are based on laser for ablation of disease-generating tissue or diseased tissue. Examples of that can be tumors, it could be centers or foci in the brain for patients that are suffering from epilepsy. We are an international company today. We have subsidiaries in Europe and in US and in Singapore. So we are spread across 3 different continents. We are in an early commercial stage with the company and our products. The products we provide to the market is targeting market segments where predominantly open surgical procedures are being used to treat tumors or to treat epileptic problems. We offer the systems for minimal invasive procedures with image guidance without the need for open surgery. As I said, the focus here is on tumor diseases. It is in prostate cancer patients that are diagnosed with early stage prostate cancer. We also look at the brain. We look at the neurosurgical market segment. We are targeting patients that has either tumors in the brain or that do have what is called drug-resistant epilepsy, where drugs do not help and the patients do not respond to those treatments. Company has grown over the years. Today we have a management team located in our head office in Lund. There is 6 of us sitting there in the head office, except for myself. We have head of clinical affairs. We have a head of regulatory, Rolf Bornschein, who is our CFO, who you will be listening to here later in this presentation, is part of the management team, as well as our CTO and VP marketing. In addition to that, we have 3 CEOs sitting in our local subsidiaries across the world. Lars-Erik in our office in Germany, heading the activities in that company in Europe. We have Michael Magnani, who you will also be listening to here in this presentation, who is heading our activities in the US market and is our president of CLS Americas Inc. And we also have Romesh Kaul, who is our CEO at the company in Singapore. Go back and talk a little bit of the company strategy and our business model. So the long-term strategy for CLS is to establish a portfolio of image-guided treatment systems for minimally invasive tissue ablation, and is an adequately reimbursed, safe, and cost-effective standard treatment that replaces primarily traditional conservative and open surgical procedures in our markets, US, Europe, and Asia Pacific. The more near-term goals is to establish our products, mainly in urology and neurosurgery. We do that through collaborations with key opinion leaders and our commercial partners, and supported by clinical evidence and existing reimbursement. The business model we have in the company here is really sort of a razor blade business model, where the revenues are coming predominantly from sales of disposable products that is used every time we treat a patient and are intimately connected to the system that we sell on the market. These are IP protected and are well priced to the end customer. We can also charge the customer a treatment fee per procedure that is not directly connected to the disposables, but also include other services than just the disposable. So those two, I would say, are the main business models that we work with and payment models we work with. Just short, going to talk about our technology platform. As I mentioned before, is laser-based tissue ablation technologies, as you can see on the image here. It is a technology that include a laser unit. It includes a workstation for the more advanced systems that we have that connects our laser system to an MR scanner, so we can use the images, information coming from the MR scanner to monitor and control the whole ablation procedure. We have also patented protected disposables that are about 2 millimeters in diameter. These are optical fibers that we use to transmit the laser from these laser units into the patient. Again, these are well protected by IP, and it is one of those, at least, that is used for each and one of the procedures. We have a workstation, as I mentioned, for the magnetic resonance image-guided positioning of the instrument, and for the ablation control, which is the ThermoGuide, which is part of that platform. We integrate the real-time monitoring and control of the tissue temperature and the ablation outcome through that ThermoGuide workstation. In the sense that the system is not used with an MR scanner, we are using temperature probes with a high accuracy to do the same thing. It allows us to measure temperature at different locations in the tissue through the use of an ordinary temperature probe with a thermocouple built into the probe. We market today these systems, and they are sold for precise, minimal invasive ablation of brain lesions and prostate tumors. These are called targeted therapies that are being offered and with our systems today on the market. The technology platform today works together with other products from other companies. CLS has worked over the years to create agreements and collaborations with suppliers of important other components that are found out at the hospitals, and there are standard equipment in the hospitals for imaging, for instrument guiding, for fusion of imaging, different softwares that are used for that, so that you can augment, let's say, an MR image or an ultrasound image to better understand what you see and to better guide instruments into the body. So today we have the imaging platforms of Siemens, GE, and Imerys, which our system is compatible with and can be installed on, and actually are CE marked to be used together with. We also have the navigation systems that exist at our customer sites that are delivered by ClearPoint, Soteria Medical, or Zivco. All those systems are compatible with our product, and we also have agreements with both ClearPoint and Soteria, which are commercial agreements and collaborations with these companies. Imaging equipment that are being used with our product is, for instance, equipment from BK Medical, which is part of GE today, is being used in a clinical trial to evaluate the use of that particular product together with our Tronberg system for ultrasound fusion guidance. We also have equipment for navigating also in the ultrasound setting. And these equipment are also used in clinical trials today in Germany here and in the US. So all in all, we have our equipment, our systems used with many other components, with many other products of other companies, and we also have agreements with those companies, making sure that at the customer end, they can guaranteed to have a product that works with the equipment they already have. So that's the technology platform. Looking a bit on the issues that we have on the market. So in terms of the patient perspective, What is it that drives CLS to develop these systems for minimal invasive ablation of tissue? Well, taking it from a patient perspective, in surgical treatment of prostate cancer and brain lesions, there are some needs that are not fulfilled today. So starting with prostate cancer, so if you imagine that you get a prostate cancer diagnosis and the recommendation from the doctor today is to wait and see what happens. This happens quite often. About 45% of all patients that are diagnosed with so-called localized prostate cancer get this recommendation from the doctor. The reason for that is that they don't understand fully at the time of diagnosis exactly how that cancer will evolve. It will be, is it aggressive, is it not aggressive, etc. The other side of the story is if you will do if you will offer them a treatment today, an active treatment today, the alternatives that they do have today is very often either radiation or it is surgery. These are radical treatments of the patients today that are being offered to about 55% of those patients that are diagnosed with localized prostate cancer. These treatments are effective in removing the tumor of the prostate. However, they are a little ineffective in protecting the patient from harm. So when we look at the frequency of side effects or complications from these two different active radical treatments, these patients often get problems with incontinence. About 2 patients out of 10 do get incontinence problems. About 7 patients out of 10 do get problems with erectile dysfunction. And when we talk to patients about our products, the treatment that these products can provide versus the discussions that they are seeing and having here with the doctors about the frequency of side effects and complications with today's radical treatment, patients are not happy about this frequency of complications. So what if there is an effective therapy offering control of the cancer with the minimum negative effects on quality of life, without the need for open surgery or radiation, a therapy that can be performed in a doctor's office and with an overall complete procedure time of less than 2 hours. That also offers a short recovery time with a minimal risk of side effects. If we move on to another patient perspective, we look at the patient that has got a diagnosis that he's got a brain tumor. Now, that tumor may not be malignant, but it is still growing fast. So if it is located inside the brain, it certainly does have an effect on sensitive, vital body structures. Removing that tumor today very often means open surgical procedure. And this is not really an option if the tumor is located deep inside your brain. Using an open surgical procedure has some risks, and these risks are high, and the outcome are unpredictable. So if there is a therapy here that makes it possible to reach into the brain, deep into the brain, to remove tumors or other diseased tissue, like a foci in a patient that do have epileptic disease. If these patients can be treated with use of this type of procedure, with this type of equipment, then we could include more patients today that do have hard-to-reach brain tumors or that are drug-resistant or do have drug-resistant epilepsy. If we look at the summary here of these issues that I just described, there is unmet needs here within these segments. When we look at surgical treatment of localized prostate cancer and brain lesions, effective deletion of the targeted diseased or disease-generating tissue has some unmet needs, particularly in the brain indication. A safe procedure with few side effects and sparing on non-targeted tissue, there are unmet needs here, both for the prostate and the brain indication. Quick recovery from the surgical procedure, which every patient really likes to have. You can get back to work more quickly. You don't have to spend time in a hospital. Again, if you have radical treatment as a surgery, quick recovery is not as fast as if you could do it with less surgical procedure or non-surgical procedure. That is applied to both prostate and the brain indications. Then we look at the cost effectiveness. Favorable cost versus benefit treatment profiles. is important to hospitals and obviously to patients, particularly patients that are either paying the procedure himself or its insurance company that pays it. All these aspects today are not fully met. So there are certainly unmet needs in the market today that CLS is looking at. And again, we are doing this, we're looking at these procedures where we have developed systems that are based on laser for image-guided targeted therapies in treatments of prostate cancer, in treatments of brain cancer, and drug-resistant epilepsy. The therapies that can be performed using our systems are called focal laser ablation in the sense of prostate lesions, or prostate FLA. When we look at the neuro and neuro indications as both tumors or epilepsy, drug-resistant epilepsy, those procedures are called neurolit, which is laser-induced interstitial thermotherapy in brain lesions. There are other procedures, there are other therapies on the market today that are looking close to our procedures that can be done with our system. Procedures that are done with high-intensity focused ultrasound, irreversible electroporation, or cryoablation. All technologies, all procedures have pros and cons. We certainly see there is still a need to improve on what's being delivered today with products like Exablade or CyberKnife or Focal One, etc. So it's an established market segment where targeted therapies are interesting to patients and by doctors as well, to overcome the issues of conservative treatment, which is no treatment, and the issues of surgical treatment that has a lot of side effects. So now we looked a bit about the problem, we're going to look more towards the solutions. And from CLS, we have developed product offerings, as I mentioned, on the technology platform that we just talked about. And we have two different systems in urology that we are marketing and selling to the urology market. It's the Tromberg Thermal Therapy System, TP and TG. These are two different levels on complexity and advancement. One of the systems, the smaller systems here, or the less complex system is the one to the left, is being offered for ultrasound guidance. The more complex and advanced system is being offered for MR guidance, in-bore MR guidance. And I will mention a bit more about these systems here and describe the systems for you that we are offering and selling to the market today. So the first system we'll look at here is the Tromberg Thermal Therapy System, TP. TP is for temperature probes. Those temperature probes are used to measure the temperature in the tissue, both to look at the efficacy of the actual ablation that goes on, but also to use them as a guard against sensitive structures. These systems being developed for MR-fused ultrasound guidance. We're using the MR image. We are fusing it onto an ultrasound system to improve the imaging and the image guidance. This is a system that we sell directly. It's a system that's been designed for doctor's office solutions or ambulatory surgical centers. This is the system today that we are offering and that we're seeing a great interest into the system, predominantly in the US market. The structure of the US market is such that about 75% of prostate patients are being diagnosed at prostate imaging centers, not at big hospitals. This system has been designed for those clinics where all these patients are going. Today, this system has a 510(k) clearance in the US, it has a CE mark in Europe, and it is currently in our limited market release in both Europe as well as in US. The systems are being used today together with the BK Medical Imaging, with Focalix fusion technology that fuses the MR image on the ultrasound image to improve the imaging component. It's used together with Philips Euronav system, which does the same thing, and it's also used together with equipment from Sibco to guide, navigate, and position our disposable laser applicators inside the prostate in a minimal invasive fashion. I'm going to show you a small video where you can see how these systems are being used. And this is a typical doctor's office setting. And there is a bit of sound here, so hopefully you can hear the sound.
Fusion-guided laser ablation is a precise office-based procedure which uses targeted heat to treat localized prostate cancer, which preserves quality of life for the patient. The equipment required for the procedure includes the Tranberg Thermal Therapy System, consisting of the laser unit and single-use laser applicators, a biplane transperineal ultrasound, and MR fusion, or micro-ultrasound of the doctor's choice. This procedure can be performed in an office, ASC, or hospital. The patient is placed in the dorsal lithotomy position at the edge of the table. The ultrasound is then inserted into the rectum, and the prostate is contoured and registered. After registration, the doctor uses the fusion software and ultrasound, or micro-ultrasound, loaded with the treatment plan, to identify the target lesion. Using given template coordinates, the doctor then inserts the laser catheter with the stylet into the target coordinates to the proximal edge of the tumor. The stylet is removed, and the laser applicator is inserted into the catheter and locked into place. A temperature probe is then placed parallel to the applicator at the lateral edge of the desired margin. Once applicator location is double-checked, the laser is activated and laser energy is applied to the target treatment area. Target temperatures are monitored in real time using the temperature probes. Instant cell death is achieved at 60 degrees Celsius. Upon completion of this individual treatment, the temperature probe and catheter with laser applicator are removed, and the process is repeated until all areas called for in the treatment plan are ablated. When the clinician is satisfied with the overall treatment, the ultrasound and any remaining accessories are removed, and the patient is allowed to recover.
So that was one of the newest animations that the company has done to clarify and to obviously market out products also towards our end customers, but to clarify the design of the system, the use of the system, etc. That particular system has been used together with a fusion technology called Focalix in a study that we recently completed. It was used by Dr. Fernando Bianco, who is the principal investigator and part of the Urological Research Network in the US. His comments about our system together with the Focalix technology is that the Tranberg laser system provides a higher degree of precision and control over the ablation shape, size, and margin compared to another technology which I previously mentioned, which is the cryotherapy, or over other focal therapies that he has worked with and seen. Additionally, he's saying that he found the Tranberg laser system to be very easy and intuitive to operate in conjunction with that Focalix fusion system for real-time image guidance and treatment planning system. We find this to be extraordinary feedback coming from a doctor that has 1,400 focal therapy procedures behind him, and he's done 20 with our system. Staying with the urology segment, moving to the next system that we have, that we are marketing and selling. This is a more advanced system, which is designed for use in an in-bore MR procedure. So this is for hospital settings, not for smaller prostate settings. And this isn't for an MR-guided FLA targeted treatment of localized prostate cancer. Now, this system then operates together with scanners with Siemens and GE and with the Soteria Medical robot for navigating, positioning, and placing our instruments in the prostate in the MR. So this is all MR-compatible technologies. Soteria Medical's platform have been used in more than 1,000 MR-guided prostate biopsy cases. And the workflow for a prostate biopsy is very similar to the workflow that this system will be used under. When you do a biopsy, you position the patient in the MR, use the Soteria robot to guide your biopsy needle to a already pre-planned location in the prostate. Typically, when you do a biopsy, you do have more than one point you want to take a biopsy at, and you have a previously prepared image from an MR scanner that you use as part of your pre-planning. There you can see exactly what the prostate is, where the tumors are, and you can then plan exactly where you want to make your prostate biopsies. Exactly the same technology then is now made available to us through our partnership with Soteria Medical to pre-plan and to guide a focal laser ablation in the prostate. Now, there's still a few further developments that needs to be done, very minor ones that are related to the software. But today, this entire system you see here on the Siemens scanner is being investigated in Nijmegen at Radboud Medical Center, together with a doctor called Jürgen Fitterer and his team. Give you a little bit of an idea, similar to the one we had before, where you can look at the procedure as it is being done in an MR in-bore setting compared to the previous procedure that was done in an ultrasound setting with a fused MR image. So the procedure is very similar. You position the introducer in the tumor of the prostate. You visualize the location in an MR scanner. You can see here that the laser applicator is going out of the MR room and into a control room outside of the MR where all the other equipment is located. So here we can visualize through the MR images where the location is. We do a test run, which shows up on our ThermoGuide workstation exactly where that heat is generated, so we know that we're in the right place. And then we can start the procedure, and throughout the entire procedure, the temperature differences, but also the resulting ablation can be visualized on the ThermoGuide workstation. And this is all done in real time. And today, there's just a handful of companies in the world that has access to this technology, that develops this technology. CLS is one of those that makes us kind of unique. So Professor Jürgen Fitterer is the principal investigator using our more complex MR-based system for MR-guided FLA in localized prostate cancer. And what he's saying is that the MR image-guided laser ablation, in contrast to other ablative technologies that I just mentioned before, the cryo, HIFU, etc., is fast. It creates a sharply defined ablation zone, which means you can control your ablation very well with our technology and the laser in itself. And it can be performed under local anesthesia in an outpatient setting. This is an important point, that instead of doing an open surgical procedure with all the risks involved in that, there is an additional risk when you're using general anesthesia. And with these procedures, you're moving it from a general anesthesia setting into an outpatient patient local anesthesia setting. It's a cost saving in doing that. It also reduces the risk for the patient. Very important. And if we look at markets such as Asian Pacific and more so even US, time is very important. So with this procedure, with an outpatient setting, the patient actually goes back after a couple of hours of observation. And the patient is back on the plane, heading back home or a car, whatever it is. It's a fantastically fast procedure compared to open surgery. Both these two systems that I just described here, both the system that is designed for MR-fused ultrasound guidance in a doctor's office or ambulatory surgical center, or the more advanced system for in-bore guidance, are all tested in different studies today. The purpose of these clinical studies is to provide data predominantly to feed the commercial activities of the company and add to the growth of the company. And as you see here, we have 4 different studies ongoing with these 2 different systems. The top study here is the study that I just mentioned that is being done with Dr. Bianco with the Urological Research Network. We just finalized the last treatment in that study a few days ago, which we communicated to the market. So there's 20 patients done in that study, and now the follow-up is ongoing. The plan there is to have a publication coming out with the results of that study. And obviously, if it's a good study with good results, it certainly will fuel our commercialization of that system, particularly in the US. There's another study ongoing with the University Hospital in Magdeburg, which are using the same system, but they're using additional products, in this case from Siemens, from BK and from Philips, to create the complete treatment system. There are 4 patients enrolled in that study out of the 10 patients planned. Toronto, we have a study we started quite some time ago, and it's a large study, 55 patients in that study. We're seeing 24 months data that we presented, or actually they presented. We also sent out a press release about these data, or news about this data, that was presented at RSNA in December 2022. These data show our favorable data, 2-year data, that we're very pleased to see. And I also mentioned the Radboud University Hospital, where Jürgen is treating patients. These are 10 patients. Now we have 6 out of the 10 patients treated. And there's actually 2 more patients coming up shortly in that study. So that completes my presentation of the products and about the clinical trials that are ongoing in the urology segment. Now, if we look at the product offering in neurosurgery, we are collaborating with the ClearPoint Neuro. This is a well-established company that has a platform for navigation and positioning of different types of instruments in the brain that are used for different purposes like drug delivery, gene therapy, aspiration, biopsies, etc. We created a collaboration with them a couple of years ago, and we have co-developed a purpose-built system based on CLS technology for use in the brain. As you can see on this image here, you can see a couple of screens, one to the right and one to the left. We built together our technology with the ClearPoint technology, and I'll show you a bit later what that looks like. The system is marketed under ClearPoint Prism Neurolaser Therapy System and is the more advanced system with thermoguide that is built for use as an inboard procedure, MR inboard procedure. It is today 510(k) cleared. We mentioned that before. We got the clearance in October last year. We started the commercialization already of this system through ClearPoint Neuro. We have the system being used in US at a couple of locations. We're moving forward with a limited market release. And once we have favorable data coming back from that market release, feedback from doctors using it, etc., that it fulfills their requirements, the plan is to move into a full market launch in the United States. So this system today is sold by ClearPoint Neuro, but it's powered by CLS. It is cleared in the US for use with ClearPoint's neuronavigation system, with Siemens MR scanners, with GE MR scanners, and with Imris MR scanner. This system is not yet CE marked. And the study that CLS is sponsoring with this system in Lund, one of the purposes of that study is to get data for CE marking the system in Europe. I'll get back to that study in a bit. I'm not going to show you the same animation here that I've showed on the other systems, but I will show you an animation that tells you, and this is a real patient case, quite recent one, what it looks like on the screen of thermoguide. So what you can see here are there's a circle and a line. This is part of the pre-planning, and you can see now as the time elapses, the top 2 images or windows, you can see a blue color that starts to appear. This is an indication of a temperature change in the tissue in the brain. You can see there's a small channel down towards that area where the blue color is appearing. That's the channel within which our laser applicator is located. The hole that is made in the head of this patient is a little bit more than 2 millimeters. And we have advanced an introducer, and we have advanced the laser applicator into that position. With thermoguide, we can then pick up and see the temperature differences. Now the color has changed from blue to green. The green color there indicates that we're getting up into the area where the cells are starting to die. At the bottom 2 images, you see the thermal dose estimation. And the scale there that goes from kind of green up to red indicates level of cell destruction. So everything that is red in an image is irreversible cell death. So this means that the red image, the red color you see here, is the volume that has been ablated. And that means if this is a tumor and the target was to ablate that inside that blue circle that you saw initially, then they have achieved the target and they can stop the treatment. And typically, this takes everything from a couple of minutes up to maybe 10 minutes in a procedure. So the actual ablation procedure is very fast. But obviously, the patient needs to be prepared. The MR suite needs to be prepared. So the entire procedure takes more than a couple of minutes. There's a pre-planning, etc. But if you compare this image here, these photos, with the photo of an open surgical procedure where you have opened your skull and you see the top of the brain, that's as far as you've come at that point. Then you have to get yourself through the brain to a location inside the brain without damaging vital parts of the brain, risking the patient's quality of life or maybe potentially even the life of the patient. Then surgery is really not an option for a patient looking like this. we have a sequence here that is a piece that was made by Swedish television, and I'm hoping that we could see that on the screen.
Flera operationer här, alltså hela vägen här bak och hit då. Den som jag gjorde nu, det var bara liksom här, ett litet stick.
Sommaren 2020 fick Petar Visivik i Lomma flera anfall. Det visade sig vara en hjärntumör och Petar opererades. Men i januari i år upptäcktes en ny tumör.
Ja, det var inte så kul. Jag vet att den är återkommande, så att jag hade ställt in mig på mentalt att den kanske kommer tillbaka. Liksom. Alltså man blir helt krossad ju.
I Lund genomförs nu en studie med en ny metod för att operera hjärntumörer som man med vanlig kirurgi inte kommer åt. Petar var den tredje patienten att ta bort tumören med en ny laserutrustning där hela operationen genomförs inuti en magnetkamera.
Det fanns ju inte som en möjlighet för typ 6 månader sedan. Så det är man nog rätt tacksamma för att det finns nu. Proceduren, om vi ska kalla det för det är att återhämtningstiden var så otroligt snabb. Jämfört med de andra operationerna som jag haft tidigare så har jag inte haft några fysiska men överhuvudtaget. Och jag önskar att andra får möjligheten också. Alltså man kollar hela sjukdomen som sådan, så omvärderar man allt liksom. Att kunna vara med sin familj, att njuta av dagarna så mycket som möjligt.
Ett snitt i huvudet, ett borrhål, så för vi in den här laserkatetern till tumören.
Att operera hjärntumörer med laser är inget nytt, men på neurokirurgen i Lund prövas nu en ny metod. I en studie sker nu hela operationen inne i en magnetkamera med en ny typ av laserutrustning för att komma åt svåråtkomliga hjärntumörer.
Vi gör hela proceduren i magnetkameran, vilket är den första i Europa, och vi gjorde med den här utrustningen, den här speciella laserfibern också, det andra fallet i världen. Vinsten är att vi inte behöver göra en stor operation på patienten, utan vi gör det här genom ett väldigt litet hudsnitt, ett väldigt litet hål i skallen, och patienten kan gå hem efter 2 dagar. Vi kan operera tumörer som sitter väldigt djupt i känsliga områden i hjärnan som det hade varit allt för stora risker att försöka operera. Vi har också ett navigeringssystem i magnetkameran för att kunna hitta rätt exakt.
Jag tror att den här tekniken kommer bli godkänd i Sverige.
Jag skulle tro att den blir godkänd inom de närmsta åren, kanske det närmsta året.
Thank you. So, and I apologize for anyone who does not speak Swedish. We did not have a translation of this. But I do have this quote after talking to Peter Siersjö, who is the neurosurgeon responsible for this study that we do together with Skåne University Hospital. And he's saying that they have been planning for this technology for several years, and that he's very pleased that they now finally have access to this technology so they can treat patients with hard-to-reach tumors in the brain. Now, I think one of the key things that, one of the key takeaways here that maybe I wasn't emphasizing strong enough is that the whole procedure is done inside the MR scanner without moving the patient. Traditionally, if you do anything, you either do an open surgical procedure and then you need to move the patient into the MR scanner to verify and scan certain things. Or you can do a similar procedure with other technologies and you then still have to prepare everything in the OR and move the patient into the MR and back to the OR again. So the uniqueness of the PRISM neurolaser therapy system together with the ClearPoint neuronavigation system is that the entire procedure is done inside the MR scanner without moving the patient and without use of open surgery. That is revolutionary compared to other technologies, and we're one of the few companies in the world that could even get close to this. So Dr. Siersjö mentioned the study. So what we're looking at here is a study that we do together. We sponsored this study to get initial data for a CE marking of this product in Europe. And today we have 4 out of 5 patients treated in that study, 1 patient remaining, and I believe that patient will very soon be treated and the final patient can be done. I cannot give you an exact date on that. If we leave the presentations on the products and how they've been used, how the doctors that are using our equipment, how they react to the use of the equipment, which is what we think is very favorable, to looking at the market opportunities. As Dr. Siersjö was saying, he's been waiting for this technology. It hasn't really existed something similar to this in the past. So if we look at these different market segments, we got urology market segment, and looking at the opportunity for us as a company, but also that's the opportunity for the patients. So localized prostate cancer, looking at it from a worldwide perspective, is about 1.4 million patients each year that are diagnosed with localized prostate cancer. If we look at the combination between US and Europe, there's more than 500,000 just in those two regions with localized prostate cancer. Those are candidates for focal therapy with our systems. We estimate the market, global market, to be worth around 35 billion, and it's growing with more than 10% a year up until 2027. Again, in this market, we are targeting hospitals, private clinic, with substantial prostate programs. Going back to the business model we have, razor blade, we're placing our laser units, our systems on the market, and we're creating revenues on either procedure fees or through selling of the disposables. So we want to have large prostate programs. Those are the initial targeted customer for us, where the use of each system can be high. If we look at the neurosurgical market or the neurosurgery market, the market opportunity there looks slightly different. Today, there's approximately 30,000 patients in the US that has glioblastoma as well as drug-resistant epilepsy each year. If we look at the drug-resistant epilepsy specifically, there's another interesting group which is quite large. It's a group that is prevalence, the group that has disease, then they are untreated, they walk around with this disease. As drug-resistant epilepsy does not kill you, you walk around with this disease, you're having a bad quality of life. Now, this is a large group which is also included in our target group. With this minimal invasive procedure, we can offer the NeuroLit procedure with the Prism Neuro Laser Therapy system. That group is definitely in target as well down the road. Today, the neurosurgery market, when MR-guided lit is used, is a relatively small market. We estimate it to be a little bit more than 2,000 procedures done each year in the US. The Europe market is behind US, but there's a huge interest, and we're coming in as an early company with a unique technology here into this market segment. And we expect to see the numbers go up to 10,000 patients annually by 2032, which is not too far off, 10 years from now. And as this spread across the other continents, we expect to see those numbers go up even further. And again, we have a unique position as a company to step in early in that development and actually drive that. Here we are targeting more hospitals than smaller clinics, etc. This is an advanced surgery, advanced healthcare that is predominantly done at larger hospitals rather than at small clinics. I want to provide an update what's going on in the US here with our partner ClearPoint Neuro. I spoke to them just recently to get an update on their business right now in the US. This is some feedback from them. The early experience with the Prism Neuro Laser Therapy system here that they have is very positive. And they see this to be an attractive and competitive product on the market, which we are obviously very pleased to hear. As I said, the neuro market is relatively small for NeuroLit. There's about 2,000 procedures performed. ClearPoint also, as I'm saying here, see this market grow significantly, and we are a player to be part of that growth. There's, again, more than 30,000 patients suffering from these small, eloquent tumors where precise focal laser treatment could be appropriate because of its size, but also because of its location inside the brain. We need, however, to create additional clinical data to improve reimbursement. I mentioned earlier on here that reimbursement is in place for those procedures that our systems are being developed for. Most procedures are reimbursed, but not at the level we want. So we are working with gathering more clinical data and argue that we want to have better reimbursement. It's a good situation to be in, that you have the possibility to generate your own data and to argue for higher pricing. It is not so good if there wouldn't be any codes or any reimbursement. That process is much longer. There's also other factors that ClearPoint sees to be driving the change from using open surgery to going into minimal invasive procedures like the NeuroLit in our product, and that is cost. So not only does it cost more to perform an open surgical procedure, but it's also the cost of taking care of the complications. And some few patients can have more complications than others, but those complications can sometimes be very costly to fix. So with a minimal invasive procedure, with our systems, the complication rates are expected to be much lower, and thereby the cost will be much lower. So that's another factor here that is interesting. Leaving the neurosurgical business update, now moving to the urology business update. This one is provided by Michael Magnani, who is our president at the CLS Americas, Inc. It's been pre-recorded.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to meet with me today. My name is Michael Magnani, and I'm the president of operations for CLS Americas. I'm going to take a few minutes to bring you up to speed on what's going on with our commercial activity in America as it pertains to our urology business, specifically focused on focal therapy for localized prostate cancer. Now, when we think about prostate cancer in America, it's important to understand how the patient flows through our U.S. healthcare system, because there are some differences between U.S. and Europe. We do have a fairly nationalized treatment pathway. Patients are typically referred to a urologist or a specialist if their primary care or their general practitioner suspects that there may be cancer. Now, that specialist will go ahead and run some tests, oftentimes doing imaging such as an MRI, and potentially even performing a prostate biopsy if they find a lesion that they think may be cancerous. Now, unfortunately, if the patient does in fact have cancer, then that treatment planning phase will begin, and the physician will be having discussions with the patient with regards to how they want to approach treating it. Now, prostate cancer is a fairly slow progressive disease, so if the cancer is caught fairly early, oftentimes the physicians will simply prescribe active surveillance or what they call watchful waiting, which we call non-curative treatments. Now, these patients typically are going to be followed up either by their general practitioner or by an oncologist, but there's not a whole lot that's being done right now. They're just monitoring it to make sure that it doesn't progress too rapidly. Now, on the other hand, if they do catch it in a later stage, or it's a little bit more of an aggressive tumor, then typically urologists will resort to more radical therapies, which are considered curative. They're going to be inpatient procedures, and they typically are associated with a lot of complications rather. So you can see that this leaves a fairly wide range in the middle for patients who have early stage cancer, who are not comfortable with simply watching and waiting. They want to intervene, but they don't necessarily want to have a radical procedure and undergo these and be exposed to these types of complications. And that's where we believe focal therapy falls into place. So we want to work on focusing on identifying a curative solution that's performed in an outpatient setting. Now, two options that are already on the market are cryotherapy and HIFU. I believe you guys have already heard a little bit about those as well. They do provide an opportunity for an intermediate intervention that is not necessarily as radical as radiation or surgery. We believe focal laser therapy ablation or focal laser ablation offers an even better opportunity, a better option with higher degree of precision and a better safety profile. Now, in terms of the urology business segment in the US, we've identified that there is a strong demand among the urology community for some sort of a solution that could be performed in an office setting. We are in full support of this migration out of the hospital and into the doctor's office for the majority of cases. We believe that this is being driven largely by the urology community, which is about approximately 13,000 strong, and has also been driven by recent advances in enabling technologies for image guidance such as MRI ultrasound fusion, as well as novel approaches to accessing the prostate. Now, it's important to keep in mind that if we can enable this migration out of the hospital and have these procedures performed in the office, this will allow the urologist to retain control of their patients, as opposed to the current situation where they have to refer them out typically to an interventional radiologist. It's the radiologist who generates the revenue. It's the radiologist who takes over the management of the patient. Now, we've been able to demonstrate that MRI ultrasound fusion does provide adequate resolution for many patients. And in addition to the fusion, we will continue to evaluate other imaging modalities for office-based FLA as they become available in the commercial space. Now, another interesting dynamic that you observe in the urology market is the establishment of what we call MSPs, mobile service providers. Now, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for a company to be able to provide the equipment and a clinical assistance throughout the case for a premium fee. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But this is a precedent that is well established. Urologists are familiar with this service-based business model from the cryotherapy space. And many physicians and KOLs that we've already engaged with have expressed an interest or a desire to try our technology in this type of a capacity. We believe this could serve as a bridge to identifying and converting full-time customers rather than simply selling equipment and having them perform the cases in an unsupported manner. Now, concierge practices are also an interesting opportunity in America. This is an opportunity where a subset of physicians can offer the latest technologies to their patients. Typically, these are high net worth patients. These are people who are paying cash for these procedures rather than relying on insurance. Now, cash pay business is certainly more attractive to both the physician and to CLS because it reduces insurance-related risks or any delays in payment. So cash flow is fairly consistent. Now, in America, reimbursement remains a top concern for pretty much every urologist outside of the concierge realm. Fortunately, CLS has been pioneering in this field. We've created the first CPT code, which is going to be able to provide coverage for performing FLA cases using fusion technology for needle guidance. We're working closely with our early adopters to ensure that they properly code these procedures when submitting the claims in order to maximize their returns. We've identified several prostate programs throughout the U.S. that we intend to actively solicit and work on converting into using our system. And we've already made inroads with about 15 of those programs and are actively in discussions about doing trials. Now, when we think about customer segmentation, I often think about it in terms of the site of service. CLS has historically relied on the hospital as the primary site for FLA cases where we were doing these procedures in an MRI under the guise of an interventional radiologist. We're looking to try to pivot from that space and move it out into the doctor's office where the urologist typically resides, and that's where the majority of the patients are typically managed with prostate cancer. Now, in America, we have a concept for an ASC or an ambulatory surgery center. I'm not sure if this is prevalent in Europe. But this is sort of an intermediate site of service. It's a little bit more, there's a little bit more equipment. You can do certain surgeries, certain outpatient surgeries in these facilities, but it's not exactly a full-blown hospital. And the reason we segregate or segment these into these categories is because the reimbursement that's provided by Medicare is contingent on the site of service. So you get reimbursed different amounts depending on where this procedure is performed. The sales tactics we intend to deploy in the urology market are the mobile service provider model, as I mentioned before, where companies are going to provide all of the necessary equipment that includes the capital equipment and the disposables, as well as on-site clinical support for a price. This enables physicians to have effectively a test drive of the technology before they commit to purchasing the capital equipment. Now, in parallel with the MSP model, we will offer the ability to buy our equipment straight out from a direct sales force for sites that do not necessarily need the clinical support and are comfortable with using it right out of the gate. Now, both of these business models can either be run directly by CLS or we can contract them out to third-party providers, and we're in the process of evaluating the pros and cons of that right now. As I said earlier, on the reimbursement front, reimbursement remains a top concern among most physicians when evaluating a new technology. Being able to articulate a pathway to consistent payment for performing these procedures is absolutely essential to establishing repeat customers. We did create our first CPT code. That's a Cat 3 code for transperineal focal laser ablation using the MRI ultrasound fusion. And we're initiating commercialization activities right now, and we're beginning the process of submitting claims for that code. And we intend to use the data that we gather from those early claims to be able to file for additional codes in the future, which will provide even higher levels of payment. Now, one of the things we did early on to be able to demonstrate that we could perform these procedures in an office setting was to conduct a feasibility study. So we set out at the beginning of last year on a 20-patient feasibility study in Miami. I'm pleased to say that we did treat our last patient just last month, a couple of weeks ago. Early safety data was presented at the AUA last spring and at the Focal Conference in the fall. We do plan on presenting some preliminary efficacy data at the upcoming AUA event this spring in Chicago, and are also hosting a private reception for multiple prospects at that conference. Last but not least, on the business development overview, CLS is very active. We are a relatively small company, so we do want to partner with companies that have compatibility or complementary technology and infrastructure. We've been active on partnering with companies who are in the market for MRI ultrasound fusion technology. We're also exploring other office-based image guidance technologies. In terms of the prostate access system, we are speaking with multiple companies as well who provide solutions both in a fixed and a freehand format. On the distributor front, we continue to look for companies that have a strong commercial footprint, very similar to our current relationship with ClearPoint Neuro in the MRI market. And last but not least, we are also actively talking with third-party mobile service providers to understand whether or not that's something we want to outsource or continue to run in-house. So just to recap, we've identified that strong demand exists in the US for an office-based FLA solution that urologists can perform. We believe integration of a new business model such as the MSP will help drive early adoption while simultaneously improving gross margins. Customer segmentation is going to be essential. It's going to help us customize our offerings to suit a range of patient demographics. We continue to be active on the reimbursement front, which we recognize is a chief concern in the US market. And last but not least, we're active on the business development front, creating partnerships for sustainable commercial success. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Michael.
You're welcome.
So I have a couple of questions for you. So CLS recently announced that CLS Americas has signed a letter of intent with Halo Diagnostics. So I wonder if you could tell me more about this collaboration.
Absolutely. So Halo Diagnostics is emerging as a national leader in the management of prostate cancer. They have some prominent KOLs amongst their staff, and they're rapidly expanding across the country. We identified them early on as a primary commercial target. We've had long-standing relationships with many of their physicians and providers. And this announcement is actually the first in what we hope is going to be a series of future announcements in terms of expansion into a more of a customer relationship with Halo. The first phase, obviously, is identifying that the technology works in their settings with their existing infrastructure, and that's the primary intent of this LOI, is to identify an early feasibility study where we can demonstrate the utility of our system.
Okay, thank you. And also in your presentation, you talked a lot about the reimbursement and also the code that you have created. I would like to know more about the process that you have been through in order to create the code.
Certainly. So the process for obtaining a CPT code in America is convoluted. It's not very straightforward. We have had to work with our experts. We have some expert consultants that focus on reimbursement. It involves engagement with the academic societies. It's important to be able to present the latest findings in the academic literature to justify that the technology is working. It's valid, it's worthy of consideration for a code. One of the aspects I didn't appreciate initially was that it's essentially a zero-sum game. when you create a new code, if you want to create a code that gets reimbursed, that means other existing codes have to give up some of their reimbursement. So the total that gets reimbursed is the same. So it's an interesting dynamic. As I said, there's lobbying, there's involvement with academic societies. You have to present at a panel meeting. And then ultimately, this was the first step in terms of obtaining the Category 3 CPT code. The ultimate goal is going to be to get what they call a Category 1 CPT code, which will provide a higher level of reimbursement as well as direct reimbursement to the doctor.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much, Michael.
You're welcome.
So, yes, thank you, Michael, for presenting an update on the urology business in the US. As you can hear, Michael is very busy, and we're making great progress on many fronts in the US. And I would be surprised if we don't see some additional agreements and potential sales coming in here in the near future. So, in the agenda for this presentation, we also want to talk a bit about the overall growth and capitalization plan for CLS as we move forward by 2025. We have 4 different buckets that we work with, and this image kind of illustrates those different buckets that we work with. And the growth strategy for CLS as we move forward towards 2025 is to really accelerate the commercialization of the existing treatment systems that we have presented to you here and market segments across our 3 geographic regions, which is the US, Europe, and Asian Pacific. The 4 buckets that we talk about here and that I illustrated in this image is the bucket of MR-fused guided laser ablation, which is typically the urology segment. The second bucket is the MR-guided laser ablation, which is the bucket of both neurosurgical procedures as well as the urology procedures. And then the third bucket we look at here is for us to achieve a more global scale operation based on our MR-guided laser ablation bucket and the MR-fused bucket, which is urology and neurosurgery combined. And at the 4th bucket here, we are still looking at the IMILT, the immune stimulatory protocol that is a unique protocol to CLS. By manifesting and establish our technologies, particularly the MR-guided technologies in urology and in neurology, or neurosurgery, I should say, that technology forms the basis for assessing the commercial potential of the IMILT protocol. And what I mean by that is that the more complex, the more advanced systems that are utilizing MR guidance with a thermoguide system is more suitable for delivering an IMILT protocol than the MR-fused ones. So this is really why we are looking into the IMILT protocol once we have established our technology on the market in one of the other buckets. So really, as we're looking at this strategy, we talk about in the first bucket a full penetration of the urology market in the US is one of those important things for us strategically. Educate patients, clinicians about the focal therapy and our systems for the early stage prostate cancer is also important to us. And then to start commercial activities in selective markets in EU together with our and Asian Pacific together with our partners. It really is the fused guided laser ablation urology, which is the first bucket for us strategically. Secondly, we look at the MR-guided laser ablation. That's both urology, as I mentioned, and neurosurgery. And this is to further develop our main market, that is the US market, with this type of product in urology and neurosurgery, and then to accelerate commercialization in the APAC region and selective markets in EU. And the third bucket is to achieve global scale. That is to go and expand our footprint beyond the US and Europe to increase the number of centers that we work with, number of installations. That really, with the business model we have, by expanding installations, we also create the foundation for growing the number of procedures performed on our systems. And at that level, we will also talk more about and look more into, I should say, the maximizing of reimbursement level that Michael was indicating here in his presentation. When we look back, now we talk about our strategy forward. When we look back at what CLS have accomplished, I just want to highlight a few things and remind the audience about a few things. We had a strong second generation product portfolio that we have developed based on our first generation that we brought to the market back in 2015. We have the second generation portfolio now established and market cleared in Europe and US. That took some achievement to do that, both in urology but also in neurosurgery. We have intellectual property that we have in the company. We have in-licensed key technology, and we have partnerships in place to be well-suited and well-positioned for the tactics and the strategy we talked about in our growth. We have initiated a generation of clinical evidence with these clinical trials that I showed you earlier on, together with KOLs in Europe and in the US, for all our products in all our markets. We have a US FDA 510K clearance that we got in October 2022 for our MR-guided treatment system for use in neurosurgery, and we just entered into a early phase market release into the US market together with ClearPoint Neuro. The commercial partnerships with ClearPoint Neuro have been, we have added one more commercial partnerships to CLS, which is the Soteria Medical, which has an equivalent technology to ClearPoint Neuro for the urology market segment. We have initial sales of the treatment system for use in neurosurgery here that happened at the end of 2022 when we received a relatively large order from ClearPoint Neuro. And as Michael was mentioning, the reimbursement codes are in place both in neurosurgery as well as in urology, but we do work on increasing the payment levels, particularly in the US. So with that kind of base, with that foundation, we are now aiming to generate a positive operational cash flow in 2025. I'm going to allow Rolf Bornschein, who is our CFO, to come up on the stage here and talk to you a little bit more about these ambitions that we have and estimates when we go forward.
Thank you very much. So I would like to run you through some numbers, actually. So we actually have a sales ambition of around 100 million SEK that we would like to reach in 2025. And it's probably not coming as a surprise to you that of course, our main focus market will be the US. And we estimate that around 70% of these sales actually should come from the US market. We will also see a ramp up in some activities in the EU, of course, but that will come a little bit on a later stage, probably around 2024. Then again, the urology segment will be our largest sales driver, should represent about 65% of our sales. And then also kind of, if you look a little bit on the different product types, of course, the disposables or treatment fees within the urology segments will also represent our main income source actually going forward. If you then look at our ambition level, how many units, so laser units, do we want to have out there by 2025? And there we actually said, our ambition is to have more than 100 units installed at customers, with customers, and they actively use it. And we would like that these doctors and the customers, they perform around 2,000 procedures on an annual basis in 2025. I mean, then you can probably say, that's it's a fairly large number. But I think Dan showed you the slide on the potential on the market size. I mean, there's 1.6 million only in the urology segment, new patients coming in globally, of course, every year. So I mean, it's still, for us, of course, it's a big number, but if you see at a bigger picture, it's a fairly small number still. Then, of course, for me as a finance guide, it's not only about sales, it's also about EBITDA, and that we also expect to be positive in 2025. I think it's important also to understand that our gross profit margins are fairly attractive. Also, if you look a little bit around other medtech companies. And also kind of the pricing model towards the end customer is also attractive at the same time. So we actually do having a good deal, but also kind of the end customer will also strike a good deal actually. So it's a little bit of a win-win situations that we're looking into. What is also important, if we want to reach this ambition or this goal, or it's an ambition, we need to be tight on our spending. So we will put kind of cost control in place and do selective investments. And of course, it's primarily going to happen in the US in a commercial setup. So we need to ramp up our commercial setup in the US in order to kind of hit our ambition level. And how we want to basically fund that is that we want to kind of take the money or the spend that we have somewhere else, probably in some central functions here in Sweden, and use this money coming from cost savings or kind of cost efficiency projects and invest it in the US. So our ambition level is that we want to develop, but we don't want to increase costs at a high pace. At the best case, probably even be cost neutral going forward. Yes. So that's a little bit around numbers. Exactly. So I'm handing over to you again.
Thanks, Rolf.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. So with that ambition going forward towards 2025, obviously it has already started and it starts now this year. We need to reach our milestones, our main milestones for this year. These milestones we have communicated earlier on. We talk about expanding the commercial partnerships. We did that already actually with adding Soteria Medical to our partners in addition to ClearPoint Neuro. We have discussions with additional partners and we're obviously looking at that, and that's one of the milestones, to add partners to us either in the distribution chain or other partners similar to ClearPoint and Soteria Medical. The commercial collaboration with US National Institute of Health. This is a milestone in 23 that for us is important. Working with the National Institute of Health in the US is a quality stamp on CLS as a company, is a quality stamp on our products. We have not yet revealed the information of what that would mean in detail, but this is a milestone for 23 for us to do that, to get that quality stamp on the company and on our products. To get a clearance also in treatment of prostate for our MRI guided system that we today have a clearance for in neurosurgery is another milestone for us to add that to portfolio in the US. We have a number of interactions with hospitals, particularly in the US, as Michael was mentioning, that has requested this kind of product on the market. We also have an ambition this year to have a clearance in the Singapore market. This is our hub for the whole Asian Pacific. And we are now working on getting that clearance, not only for one of our products, but two products. We're looking at both the MR guided system and also the MR fused ultrasound guided system. We're also having a milestone for 23. As you probably understand, we are looking into the more long-term financing of the company, and we're also looking into restructuring the capital that the company has. That is another important milestone, to have sustainability in this company and be able to achieve our goals, both our strategic and our tactical goals for the period up until 25. The neurosurgery market specifically here, as an example, we've set targets for ClearPoint to at least establish the systems in 4 to 6 prominent neurosurgery centers in the US to create a basis from which they can expand. We have a similar goal in urology for CLS, to have established ourselves at least in 6 to 8 prominent prostate centers from which we can expand. And these centers are not limited to US. We're looking at Europe and Asian Pacific. So even if what Rolf is saying here is true, we will have an increased focus on the US market. It doesn't mean that we will leave the European market or the Asian Pacific market. So I think I'm going to give it back to Rolf again, and he can talk a bit more about the capitalization process to support our growth.
Yes.
Thank you, Rolf.
Thank you very much. So capitalization, of course, we need some funding in order to support the growth. So the first part, of course, very actually short-term funding. I just want to remind everybody that the period for the TO5 warrants has begun. Holders of the warrants, you can exercise or subscribe for new shares at a price of 46 euro per share. And it began basically yesterday to run until the 28th of February. And we expect, I mean, if it's fully utilized, we should end about like 30 million SEK. And of course, then some deductions from transaction costs will come on top. So that's the short-term part. But then, of course, we also need to have a more long-term perspective, which is, of course, very important. So we are actively working with kind of having a long-term financing solution in place, and that we will expect that will happen in a timely manner during 2023. And that kind of, again, there is one part that we're looking into is kind of restructuring our capital. And then I talked about the cost savings and to have tighter cost control in place that will also help to reduce the overall capital need, of course. And then I think what is very important that we definitely shouldn't forget about, that we also expect to have some cash in from our sales for probably for the first time, and from our commercial activities actually. And if you kind of look even into 24, actually, we expect to reach a sales level that we can actually fund in 24 50% of our operational costs with our sales. And then we actually expect in 2025 we will have a positive operational cash flow. I think that's also kind of very important to underline.
Thank you, Rolf.
Yes.
So again, we're coming back to the end of this presentation. We're getting into an executive summary. Looking at a little bit of the investment highlights here, just to remind you, it's been a long session. So again, CLS, we're addressing demands for new, efficient, minimally invasive treatments. The treatments today are not meeting the demands both from the patients or the doctors today, with the high level of complications very often recorded with open surgical procedures, or the unpleasant psychological and mental situation with a wait-and-see approach, particularly with the prostate patients. So this is really what we're going after. We are an international company today. We have locations in Singapore, in Europe, in US, with sales within urology and neurosurgery. We offer in this setting precise image-guided laser-based treatment systems for tissue ablation. I have to remind that is a replacement for open surgical procedures. It is a replacement for wait-and-see approach with patients. The initial sales that we got with ClearPoint Neuro was made already last year. 5.5 million was the order from them to fuel into their limited market release. We have partnerships in place with leading imaging and navigation companies to safeguard the offer to the patients by having agreements in place. This is for full integration of our system with a customer system that comes from Siemens, that comes from BK, that comes from other manufacturers, and obviously ClearPoint. We look at supporting clinical evidence that is ongoing right now in clinical trials. We went through some of those trials that we have both in urology as well as in neurosurgery. This trial that is ongoing here with Skåne University Hospital that has been kind of in the media lately is the initial trial that is designed to start generating the data for a future CE mark of the neurosurgical system in Europe. We expect to see initial results also this year from some of these clinical trials, but also in next year. We had the early results coming out intermediately last year in the study in Toronto as an example. And fundamentally, we have products that do have CE mark. They do have 510K clearances. We have a strong IP specifically on our disposable laser applicators that are run all the way till 2036, which gives us a security around the design of the most important, which is the products that is generating recurrent revenues. And there is reimbursement in place for the procedures that are performed using our equipment, even though we want it to be higher, and actively working on that. And again, we are looking now with an ambition to start generating a positive operational cash flow in 2025. And with a sales ambition here to reach about 100 million SEK in 2025. This is an ambition that we have. We also have an ambition to have an EBITDA that is positive in 2025. these are some of the highlights. I just want to leave that with you after this presentation. And obviously, as a medical device company working with systems and products and patients, we obviously hope that you will join our efforts in giving tomorrow's cancer and urology patients access to new improved treatment options from CLS that are both safe, effective, and that provide improved quality of life. So thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting to hear your presentations. So we have got a lot of questions from investors. So we can start with that in the US, one of the most significant events within the urology segment in the short term will be the potential FDA clearance of CLS MRI-based treatment system for focal treatment of localized prostate cancer. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the timeline here, and also in what way an FDA approval changes the US offering.
So it's always hard to tell about timelines with reference to clearances when we have to deal with the FDA. So, but what we do think is, as we are basing that clearance on the clearance we have received for the MR-based treatment system in neurosurgery, we expect that this time it will be faster. That's probably what we can say. That is based on the interaction we already had with the FDA. With that in place, we will broaden our product portfolio to also include a more advanced system for patients that has a more difficult to treat tumor location. There are systems on the market today that offer something similar that are MR based. And with the discussions we've had with typically urologists and interventional radiologists that works at bigger hospitals, they see that minority of patients, they are not being treated by the urologists in the ASC or in the doctor's office. So with that addition to our product portfolio, we'll basically be able to offer a focal therapy treatment to just about any prostate cancer patient. And it's, at least that's our ambition, to add that to the portfolio.
Okay, thank you. And of course, we have received many questions about the financial situations, and you have talked about it in your presentations, but maybe we can talk about it more. So due to the high burn rate that you have, and also the historical high number of share issues, the financial situation is something that may be seen as problematic for investors. So what's your thoughts of the future from a capital need perspective, and also how do you tackle this internally?
So I'm going to let Rolf comment on that.
Yeah,
I think we touched it already.
But I think we are all aware of that. That is it's a difficult situation, of course, for us. So that's very openly said. But I think also kind of very openly said that we are working actively, first of all, to kind of to improve the capital structure, can basically say. But then, as I also kind of said before, there are other elements. So it's not only the, you can say, the external funding that has, of course, a big relevance, especially for shareholders. But I mean, as you also mentioned, the costs and what we can actually do with kind of as a company ourselves. And then, of course, one leg is sales, so getting some cash in. And then, of course, to control the spend in a better way, or to kind of spend in a different way, kind of, if you want to say that. So kind of taking the taking some of the money and invest it in an activity that will actually generate some income, like we're planning to do actually.
Yeah, we will also come back to the cost later in the Q&A. But just a follow up, you also have a loan. What is the future plan of this loan, and do you believe that loan is a good way of financing a business that, you know, it may increase the costs and also be seen as a short-term solution? So what are your thoughts about the loan?
Well, I think in general, short-term solution. Well, if you use, if you borrow money to use that as a bridge, I think that in general is depending on where you are with the company, I think is an interesting opportunity. But obviously one needs to work with that loan actively when moving forward in terms of looking at, you know, how we could amortize, how we could look at the terms and conditions and so forth with, and getting other types of money into the company and ultimately pay the loans back. So I think that's on the table for us is multitude of opportunities to capitalize this company, and we are working actively with that. And as Rolf was saying in his part, it is work that is ongoing, and we are confident that we will find a solution for CLS that includes many parts. That includes also us looking at the loan situation and looking at other types of deals that will fund the company going forward, and that we will solve that in a timely manner in 2023.
I can add from the board's point of view that we are working very actively in trying to work on the capital structure of the company. One has to remember a little bit how 2022 was. I mean, we came out of COVID, the stock market collapsed more or less for this type of companies, really. And so the funding possibilities in 2022 were quite limited compared to 2020 and 2021, right? So that sort of led to this type of loan situation that we have was supposed to be bridge loan, really, but to continue. So now the situation is somewhat improving in the stock market, I believe, for these type of companies. Actually, you know, it's as long as you don't make any money out of the company, it's going to take some time, and you need external capital. So what we are reviewing, or what we're working, as I said, very actively, is all sorts of possible external funding to bring into the company to reduce the leverage as we have in the company, as one example.
Okay, thank you. And also another question from our Slack channel. How will you motivate the existing shareholders to join the TO4 and TO5 emissions when they have been diluted so many times already?
I think the terms and conditions for the TO5 with a 46 euro per share is a fantastic opportunity to get on board this company. The motivation that we can give to them is presenting, you know, what we're doing with this company, our products, how well they're being received. I think, as you can see in our presentation here, the interaction we have with doctors, the interaction we have with patients and other partners is giving us feedback that we really have hit the nail when it comes to our products. And we're expecting to see a ramp up in the US specifically for our sales of these products. So this is how I would motivate, you know, the current share owners and the current holders of TO5 to continue to support the company.
If you look actually what we've been achieving over the last 12, 18, 24 months, it's quite significant, really. I mean, we came out of COVID, really, and the team actually, it's a very good team we have as a company, actually, managed to implement a number of things. And the key thing is the clinical side, the patient. The patient is the focus. How do we actually help the patient? And how do we help the providers, the doctors, the physicians to provide better type of clinical therapy? And I think the recent studies that we've seen both in the US and in Europe points to the fact that actually we have a very good product segment, actually, product assortment. And that's really what's the motivation. Now, the medical technology field takes some time to develop. But, you know, the fact actually that we are on the way in the US with clinical work, actually, as well as the reimbursement work. Yeah. But I'd like to add, on behalf of the company, and that we're very appreciative of the support that we've had from the shareholders over the last number of years, actually. And they're still staying with us. And we get a lot of questions, we do, no doubt about it, actually. But we believe that we're on the right way.
Okay, and if we go back a bit, Rolf, we talked about the expenses in the company. So just how do you expect the company's expenses to develop during the next couple of years?
We should. I mean, my expectation is that as I said, that we shouldn't see significant cost increases over the next couple of years, basically. I mean, as said, and as also kind of pointed out by, I mean, a lot of times, we are at a cost base where we need to find a solution with what we have, basically. I mean, that's for me, that's, I mean, fair said. And of course, I mean, we identified a couple of projects where we actually see potential to kind of change also processes, use resources in a better way to actually get the cost base down, to also fund commercial activities in the US, of course. So that is, again, I don't expect that any significant cost increases over the next couple of years. We cannot afford that, to be very frank.
Okay, interesting. And as we know, you have a collaboration with ClearPoint in a neurosurgery segment, and we also learned that you have partnered up with a smaller company in Sotera Medical. But what are your thoughts of a larger partnership, maybe especially within the urology segment?
Well, if that larger collaboration would be a distributor type of company, I believe that strategically or tactically that what we work with now is to have looked for companies that have complementary technologies to us and that we will partner up. That's a stepping stone. And what I'm seeing in front of me is that together we may be looking at a bigger partner, so that when we combine our product offering we have today and we see that how that has been picked up on the market, and if we see our own limitations in our two companies, then we'll look for larger partners to be able to faster and more efficiently commercialize our products.
Yeah, you kind of answered the question, but a follow-up to it, what positive and negative sides do you see with a larger partner? You kind of
I think there's a classical one I think we all experienced who's been in the medical device business, maybe even other businesses. If you partner up with a larger company for distribution before your product's been validated by the market, before you have sufficient reimbursement in place, there is a huge risk that you get marginalized. And their sales force, even if there are many and they're located across the world, they will sell other products than yours. So timing is of essence here for us to make sure that we partner up with these companies when we have the right product offering at the right time that has been qualified. So it's definitely not off the table. Timing is important.
And you also have several ongoing studies, and one within the oncology segment together with immunophobics. So I wonder, could you tell us more about this study, and also when can we expect to see some data from it?
So the study with Immunophotonics, just to recap on that a little bit, is we are supplying the equipment into their study. It is a study that is run by actually SAKK, which is a large CRO in Switzerland, and the products, which is a drug candidate by Immunophotonics, is combined with the Traunberg technology, and we are delivering the IMILT, the immune stimulatory protocol, and that's combined with their drug. Now we have number of patients being treated. We've gone through phase 1. We're in phase 2 in that clinical trial, and I would say initially that all communication actually around that would come from Immunophotonics or SAKK, not from us. So what we do know today is that it's a phase 2 right now. We are continuing to supply products into the clinical trial. We're equally interested in now as we were before to understand how well these two products work together in treating late-stage cancer. That's the whole purpose of us having the agreement with them, to understand better about the IMLT in combination with our product. Now, I believe, and I may not be correct, but there is about 12 or 13 patients in total in that study at this point. But we have not yet had the chance to speak with Immunophotonics to review data at this point in time in the phase 2.
And also, if we continue with the oncology segment, you have earlier mentioned different indications that could be of interest for you, for example, breast cancer, pancreas, lung cancer, and so on. Do you believe that you will focus on all these indications, or do you believe that it's better to highlight on a specific one, or is that dependent on the study result maybe also?
If you're referring to the IMILT?
Yeah.
Yes. So we would like to know first a little bit more about the outcome of the treatments in the study that Immunophotonics is running. But if we look at the preclinical data that we have that supports the IMILT mechanism of action, it is not limited to breast or limited to any of the other types of cancers. So obviously we can see a bigger potential than just specific tumor types. There are other limitations that may guide us in how we prioritize the different cancer types, and that is getting access to it. How well will our MR-based technology platform, which is the one which has the highest accuracy and precision of the two systems we have, how well does that interact with the tumor type that will respond, which we think will respond greatly to an IMLT protocol? So some of these questions are not quite answered yet, and the fundamental is we'd like to know a little bit more about what comes out of the study with Immunophotonics. If you go back to the strategy image that we showed you for the company, we got the IMLT in the bucket 4, so we can have the other fundamentals in place, understanding, and have more room to work with the IMLT protocol. IMLT protocol for us is very important, but it also represents a huge potential for patients and doctors, and it is important that we treat it with that respect that is needed, that we don't deliver it with the wrong technology, etc.
Okay, and if we continue with, here's a question from an investor. Can you tell us a little bit about the upcoming collaboration with Exact Imaging in the US? And also, is it for Focalyx a competing or complementary collaboration?
So at this point, I cannot talk too much about Exact Imaging, but I can say that Exact Imaging is a ultrasound-based imaging technology, which is different from the standard imaging in the sense that it is a micro ultrasound. So it's a much higher frequency. With that micro ultrasound technology, the resolution of the image is fantastic with the ExactView system of Exact Imaging compared to a more classical normal ultrasound. So what does that do for us? Well, for us working with therapy treatments based on biopsies or other diagnostic imaging, obviously that high resolution has a multitude of importance to us and the potential outcome of the treatment that we are providing to the patient. Now, if you compare that with other technologies, you mentioned Focalyx, there is also technologies of the Uronab with Philips, etc. Those are all fusion-based technologies. So Exact Imaging, the ExactView system, is not fusion-based. It's based on micro-ultrasound pure, not fusion. That's how they are different. Now, these different technologies are being perceived differently by urologists. So some urologists will prefer the fusion technology platform. Some will potentially prefer the micro-ultrasound platform. So I see them as complementary to each other.
And we also saw in your presentations that you had this sales ambition of 100 million. An investor also wonder, why don't you present any of your own sales forecasts, as it would be positive from an investor perspective?
Well, this is something that we are discussing to start doing that. I think that it's about timing. It's important to us. I think Hans just mentioned it. We just recently came out of COVID. We came out of a pandemic. We understood the market and the huge interest for our systems is there, but there are market mechanisms, etc., that we are still battling with. There's a war in Ukraine. There's so many things that externally affects us. But certainly with the 510K clearance that we got in the US for the neuro system, presents an additional opportunity for us to create revenues. And we are definitely considering in the future to look more into short-term prognosis and forecast numbers. Yes.
Okay, and also another question, why have you chosen to do this strategy update after the price setting of the TO5 emission and not earlier?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I think that the investor maybe mean that a strategy update could potentially, rise the share price.
I understand that. Yeah. There were certain circumstances that made us pick this time point that I can't really go into right now.
Okay. Right. Yeah, let's continue. Also a question about insider trading. Why is the insider trading low when the share is currently trading at a low level? And also that you said that you completely believe in this high potential of the company.
There are certain rules there as well for us insiders when we can and cannot trade. So obviously right now in the last 30 days we were not possible for us to trade in front of the Q4 coming out. So in this last period of here, we could not trade because of that reason.
Okay, and if we continue to you, Hans, an investor also would like to know more about the board and what they're currently working with. And you told us about the financial situation and so on, but could you tell us more about that?
On the financing side, so we actually have an internal group, you can call it actually, that deals with the financial issues, and it includes obviously Dan and Rolf, myself and Lars-Erik Eriksson, who was the previous CFO and a board member, and also the co-founder of the company actually. So we work almost, I wouldn't say daily, but at least 2 or 3 times a week, constant meetings actually. And we go through a number of opportunities or alternatives actually for doing this kind of thing. So it's a very active process on when it comes to financing strategy. Quite similar to a lot of other companies actually in this stage actually. Then we actually have a strategy group which formulates the strategy going forward. And it's chaired by Paolo Raffaelli, who is a board member since 2 years ago, I think it is. Maybe last year. And he comes from the Medtronic world, so he kind of knows the medtech world and medtech technology, etc. And that group consists of him, obviously, myself, Lars-Erik Eriksson, you guys as CEO, and then Stefan Dymling, who was the previous CTO and who is actually the company's or the board's expert on technology. And you know, he's a little bit the father of not least the FDA application that's gone through and the whole system, etc. So he's very vital. So he's on the board as well. Then we have a scientific advisor board, or the clinical advisor board. And that's headed up by Marika Krohn, who is another board member. And she's based in Finland. She is a doctor by training, oncologist. She works for Sanofi in France and deals with our oncology programs, etc. So she's very skilled in knowing clinical trials and how that study should be organized, etc. And to her help, she has 2 previous board members, Rolf Kissling and Carl-Johan Tranberg, who's the other founder of the company, actually. So they focus quite a lot on the IMILT, but they also are now stretching into the prostate market and the neuro market. So that's kind of thing. And then we have what we call a remuneration committee, which is headed up by Sandy Brandmeier, who is based in the US. She's American. She's in the medtech world as well. Lots of experience operational from the US side. So she looks after the structure of personnel matters, and some HR, compensation matters, bonuses, all that kind of thing. So that basically takes care of the whole board, myself, Lars-Erik, Stefan, Marika, Sandy, and Paolo. So the board is very active. I don't know how many board meetings we've had, but we have board meetings constantly, actually, so kind of thing. So that is an active board, really, kind of thing. And, you know, what did they bring to the party? Well, Marika, the clinical side, Sandy, the US perspective, Stefan, the technologist perspective, Paolo, the strategy, Medtronic perspective, and the other 2 we talked about. So that's what the board does.
Okay, great. And also another investors believe it would be positive with some kind of newsletter, for example, regularly, since he or she believes there's a lack of updates from the company. And I wonder if is this something that you talk about that could be interesting for you to send out some kind of newsletter?
We have a decision already on the newsletter to be sent out. We're now we're separated between press releases and newsletters, and I think one of the things that, and I will take responsibility for that, is that the distribution of news is not optimal. So we're looking into that and to improve our distribution of news, which is different from our distribution of a press release. And so we are definitely distributing news, but we don't reach every person in the investment community with our news. And this is something we will resolve, and I apologize for that. Yeah.
And this has also been mentioned in your presentations, but an investor wonders which of CLS treatments that has reimbursement in the US today, and also if there's any timeline for the treatments without reimbursements.
Okay, so when it comes to the neurosurgical market segment, there is a reimbursement code and reimbursement in place. It's an inpatient procedure, so traditionally there has been reimbursement for quite some time for craniotomy, etc. So there is a reimbursement in place there. Again, something that I do know we, together with ClearPoint, wants to improve that reimbursement level. But there's a code, there's a decision, and there's a payment decision, and there's money. When it comes to the ultrasound, the MR-fused ultrasound procedure, FLA, for prostate, as Michael was referring to, we managed that on our own. We created the code. We created a Category 3 code. We got it into an APC level, which is then the payment level. So we know there is a payment. Now we want to get that up a couple of steps to have an improved reimbursement and then move it into a category 1 code, which is easier to get reimbursement out of. It's more or less mandatory that you will get the reimbursement at that time. So for both those two, there is reimbursement in place. For the MR-guided system for FLA treatments of prostate, there are a multitude of components existing in that procedure. There's not reimbursement for the entire package. There is reimbursement for parts of it. So we need to work harder on that. And I don't have a timeline at this point because we've spent most of our time looking at the MR-fused ultrasound solution and creating the code there. So the next step is the MR-guided.
Okay, and also, what's going on in Mayo Clinic? Are they still a customer of CLS?
They are still a customer of CLS, and they're focusing their efforts with our technology on vascular malformation treatments. We are in contact with them. We talk with them. One of the things they're asking for is the MR-guided FLA system for them to continue work on the prostate. So we do know that we have one early customer. Once that system gets cleared through the FDA, they will most likely buy instantly.
Okay, great. And also another question from Slack. When can we expect a larger order from the US imaging centers regarding prostate cancer treatments?
Well, certainly our ambition is to have that this year, obviously. To meet our goals of growth, that is a target set for us to have that coming in this year. And I do know that Michael, as you could hear, is working very hard on that. One example is his work with Halo that has now reached a point where we signed an LOI, and we are working on advancing that LOI into a more sort of firm agreement with them. I don't have the timeline for that exactly, but this is an example of what Michael is doing on the US market. There are other examples. So I certainly believe that we will receive orders in the micro-ultrasound fusion FLA space throughout the 23.
Okay, and I just have one last question. So if you just could highlight one specific thing in 2023, what would it be?
Well, it has to be that we have secured a more long-term financing of the company that we are happy with. And what that structure will look like, we cannot say at this point, but certainly for me as a CEO, that's a very important milestone for the company in 2023. The other one is that we could see us moving towards our ambitions to be cash positive in 2025. Those two are major things for me as my targets.
Yeah, and that was the last question. Thank you very much for the whole event and all the presentations and so on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.